Mike Ertel is a Seminole County resident, husband and father of 2. Graduated from Seminole County's Lake Howell High, the community that he still calls home. The University of Maryland, 8 years in the U.S. Army. He's been serving Seminole County as supervisor of elections for 7 years. In 2012, he testified before a United States Senate subcommittee about election law. He has been recognized as an elections expert by the American Bar Association, the American Association of Political Consultants, and the International Electoral Affairs Symposium, and he's the 2011 recipient of Campaigns and Elections Magazine's Innovator Award. Please welcome Mike Ertel.
So here's what Mark Schulman told me a few weeks ago. Where's Mark? Mark's right here. And Mark says, here's what I'm going to do, Mike. I really want you to come and speak to a great group of patriots. And then about a week ago, he says to me, but what I'm also going to do is I'm going to have somebody talk about voter fraud before you and whip everybody up and then ask you to go ahead and answer any questions about voter fraud as it takes place, within Seminole County. So Mark and I, my former friend Mark, no, seriously, this is one of those issues that this is our job. And so as and if you raised your hand and you said you're going to help out with the folks at True the Vote, then you go through the training and you work through your local elections office, if any of those elections offices tell you that it's not their job to help you out, it is their job. It is our job. It's my job to help you out. We have in our office an 8-word mission statement. The top two words, and by the way, I do want to point out a couple of elected officials that are here. Scott Plake, and our state representative for District 37, new District 30, is here today. And the chairman of the Seminole County Commission, the person that approves my budget, is here today as well, Commissioner Brenda Carey. And I point that out because they know very well of our 8-word mission statement. The first 2 words of our mission statement are efficient elections, meaning everything we do, all of the checks that Jason does when he goes through our database, it needs to be on the up and up. It needs to be good. And he needs to leave our office saying, wow, that is one efficient operation. However, no matter how efficient the operation is done, if you don't trust the process, it doesn't matter. In 2000, and in fact, we're recording this, so this is no longer top secret, but I'm going to tell you, in every single election, at least half of the candidates lose. And when they lose, they don't always necessarily want to blame themselves. So they want to look at the process. And so for years and years and years, and Jason has talked a little while ago about how one side has always attacked the electoral process, saying if their candidate lost, then obviously it was a procedural issue. Clearly, it was not the fact they didn't have enough volunteers or they didn't have the right vision for whatever the entity is that they were running. So we need to make sure that everything we do, and not just my office, the Orange County Supervisor, the Osceola, Lake, the Volusia, all of those offices need to be able to be so above the fray that you know that everything is working perfectly. So I do encourage you, be it either through True the Vote or just on your own, to go ahead, go to your local elections office, check everything out, and make sure that everything is working well. You are going to hear over the next couple of months, leading into this election, a couple of things that are aimed at scaring you. You may have read last week and this upcoming week about 180,000 illegal aliens are registered to vote in the state of Florida. Has anybody heard that other than just today? Well, here's what happened. And I'm not trying to explain away the number of 180,000, because clearly if there's 180,000, a big number, there is a number out there. Our Florida Department of State decided to take a look at the DMV database. And on the DMV database, if it said that somebody is not a citizen, they then said, well, clearly they're not a citizen. And they've registered to vote, and they're not a citizen. So they compared those 2 databases. What a lot of it did not take into account is that when did, Grant Libel, when did you get your driver's license? What year? 1996? You are a young man. Okay, so Grant got his driver's license in 1996. So if he gets his license in 1996 and then never contacts the driver's license bureau again because he stays at home, he doesn't move, and then, and by the way, let's say he got it in 96 and he was a citizen of Panama. He gets his driver's license in 96. In 1997, if Grant goes out and goes through the legal process of becoming a citizen, at the citizenship ceremonies that take place throughout the state, your local elections office is in the back of the room registering people to vote. So we're there registering you to vote as soon as you become a citizen, because that's vital. And I said this in the article in the paper this week, the privilege of voting is dramatically more important than the privilege of driving. And our new citizens know that, because what they do as soon as they get their citizenship, they register to vote. You know what they don't do? Go to the DMV. Have you been to the DMV recently? So they don't necessarily go to the DMV and update that data. So what we really have is a database of people who have yet to update their data with the DMV. Will it turn out that there are a few people in the state of Florida who are registered to vote and yet also not citizens? I think we're going to find a couple of folks. Absolutely. Will it be 180,000? No. Will it be 537 maybe? We'll find out what that total number is. But remember, in 2000, 537 votes is what determined the leader of the free world. And by the way, the leader of the free world that was in power on 9/11. You're also going to hear a couple of other things throughout the year about how the entire process is against a certain segment of voter because early voting hours have changed. They're going to say early voting hours are so dramatically different than in 2008 that this is clearly what, and Jason called this, he's a voter suppression law that was passed last year. This is what you're going to hear, that it's a voter suppression law. And every media outlet that says voter suppression law without saying so-called or without saying what opponents say is, clearly needs to be edited. So they're going to say that because early voting hours have been decreased, or the local elections office has the flexibility of more flexibility on early voting, then clearly that's going out against a certain population. So I first voted. My first vote I ever cast was in 1988. I'm 42. Was in 1988 in the Republican presidential preference primary, and I voted for Pete DuPont. Thank you. The other voter of Pete DuPont in the 1988 presidential preference primary in Florida. And I did it right here in Seminole County. How many hours of early voting were there in 1988 when I cast that ballot? 0. In 1960, when John F. Kennedy was elected president, how many hours of early voting were there? 0. In 1992, when Bill Clinton was elected, how many hours of early voting were there? 0. 96 when he was reelected, 0. 2000 when a lot of people think Al Gore won Florida, how many hours of early voting were there? 0. 2004, you started early voting. 2008, you increased the hours and increased the location availability. And then, so finally, 2012, we're trying to reach the new normal. I mean, it's like one of these government things where if you always fund something to the maximum level, if you don't fund it to that maximum level next year, then clearly you're making a cut. Well, sometimes you're just trying to right-size the operations to what the reality of the day is. So in 2008, how many hours of early voting were there in the presidential election? 96 hours. In 2012, how many hours of early voting will there be in the presidential election? 96 hours. 96 minus 96 is how many hours have been cut from early voting? That is 0. Thank you for the Amy Lockhart running for school board figured out the good hard math question. Thank you very much from you. So this new the law that says that you have to turn in. If I were to register you to vote, if I were to see you, sorry about that. If I were to see you outside of Kmart one day and I register you to vote, and I promise I'm going to take this registration form back to the elections office within 2 days. A lot of folks say that 2 days is far too little time to be able to put this in the mailbox or drive this over to the elections office. In reality, here's what's happened in years past. In years past, folks would go out, they'd get information about citizens on a voter registration form. They would have 10 days to turn it in. What do you think would happen to your private information within those 10 days? I'm not going to tell you what I think happens to it sometimes. I do know that sometimes campaigns in general will take the information when they register somebody to vote, and they will make photocopies of all of those voter registration forms. And then they have some data. There's a fella in DeLand, former city commissioner in DeLand, who recently became part of an investigation for having his son, who was out registering voters, taking some of that information and using it for purposes other than registering you to vote. Acorn's biggest problem that they did, or groups like Acorn, I'm not going to single any organization out, groups like Acorn, let's say Chestnut, that would go out and register voters, one of their biggest issues a few years ago was what they would do is they would say, and I'm not saying Acorn did this. Any lawyers in the audience? Exactly. Okay. So I'm not saying Acorn, but there were some groups that would say, we are not going to, we're going to spiff you. It's a sales term. We're going to spiff you. If you could turn in 100 voter registration applications to us, we will give you $100. So rather than going out and getting your feet dirty and going out and register voters, a lot of times what folks would do is simply open up the phone book, and they would see somebody's name in the phone book. They would, oh, Sharon Rousey. Okay, I see her. She's in the phone book. I'm going to write on here, Sharon Rousey. Her address is in the phone book. I'm going to write her address down. I'm going to write her phone number down. I'm going to pick a political party for her, which, by the way, is all public record anyway. And then I'm going to do her signature, and then mail it in or give it to my organization so they could do the spiffing. With that, what happens with there, now is that not a system that is ripe for fraud? Paying somebody per application that they received. That is what's called a commission-based salesperson, and the entire sales apparatus is in the phone book. Fortunately, what we have in our office is we check every single application. We check it not only against your driver's license number that's put down here, and a lot of times what they would do is they would fake a driver's license number or fake the last four of a social or use poor penmanship on purpose in hopes that we wouldn't check. We did. So then we would look it up, look every single one of them up, and then a few years ago, actually last year, I went to I took a course on forensic document examination from West Virginia University, which means I can now tell, not perfectly, but certainly better than before, the difference between real signatures and not real signatures, meaning a forgery of some kind. So we check every single one. So in our office, we are working very hard and very diligently. If you think that there is something about somebody's record, if you know that your neighbor has moved and been out of town and lived in Kentucky for the past 27 years, give us a call and say, hey, Mike, we think that the neighbors may not actually live there. We don't have anybody registered to vote in Chick-fil-A, by the way, in Seminole County, because while we love Chick-fil-A, we don't love people living in Chick-fil-A. And we check, we work in concert with our county, and I'm so glad that Chairman Carey is here, because we work in concert with our county and our property appraiser every single application that comes in, every single one. We run that address to make sure that it's an actual residential address. You cannot be registered to vote inside a mailboxes, et cetera, mailbox. We also have a listing of every single home that has more than 5 people, and we've been doing this for years, more than 5 people registered to vote in that home. Is it really a big family, or is it a really big something? So we have a list of all of that, and we compare all of that, and we do the things to make sure that you don't read about stuff happening in Seminole County as much as you may read about stuff happening in he had mentioned Wyoming, where one of the folks that signed the recall petition for Governor Walker was a Donald Duck. Well, Donald Duck is a fictional character. He's not allowed to recall Scott Walker. So in closing, I just want to make sure that you know that each of your elections offices are doing as much as we can to ensure that folks like Jason, in a year, that Jason will say, you know what? Wow, we went over, we checked Seminole County, and golly, there was nothing there to see. That's our job. That's voter confidence. Thank you very much.